All right, let's jump right into this explainer of the Echo of Command. We're looking at some seriously deep themes here. Class warfare, the total fallacy of genetic determinism. If you've ever found yourself wondering exactly how a hyper-rigid, segregated society justifies its own existence, and, more importantly, what happens when that whole justification completely unravels, well, this is an absolutely incredible case study.
So 12.4%. Just imagine that for a second. Imagine your entire life's worth, your career, where you live, your whole future just totally dictated by this one unchangeable number. No matter how incredibly hard you work or how smart you are, this little percentage, it's your ceiling and your floor. You literally can't escape it.
And that right there is the inescapable reality aboard the Aether. So, the Aether is a generation ship, a massive, self-contained spacecraft built to cross star systems over multiple lifetimes. You've got 50,000 souls currently hurtling through the dark toward a star called Epsilon Eridani. The crazy part? The people alive on board today were born in transit and they'll die in transit. They will literally never see the final destination.
Now, what makes the society tick is something they call the purity index. The ship is strictly divided by it. The elites, making up the top 10%, boast an index above 85%, and they basically run the whole show. Below them, you've got the mid-levels, and then at the very bottom, sitting under 20%, are the laborers. This index isn't just a number, it's a genetic metric that compares everyone's DNA to the ship's founders, the original crew of 200 who are actually still preserved in cryosleep. So basically, the closer your DNA matches theirs, the higher your status.
So for this explainer, we're really zoning in on a guy named Elias Kane. He's a waste reclamation janitor sitting at an incredibly meager 12.4% purity. In a society like this, he is effectively invisible. He just spends his days scrubbing graded floors, desperately trying to keep his head down. And why? Because he's just trying to protect his 12-year-old daughter, Mira. Her index is a heartbreaking 9.8%, which means she's already relegated to lower-tier creches learning basic sanitation. They're just totally trapped in a system that deems them essentially worthless.
But, things on the Aether are getting incredibly tense. The ruling council claims absolute authority based on their official historical timeline. They assert that the original commander, Captain Harlan Voss, died this heroic death during a solar flare back in year 7. And over the centuries, this high council rose to power by pushing their supposedly pure descent from those early founders. Fast forward to the present day, though, and things are falling apart. Resource rationing is tightening, algae vats are failing, and this extremist faction, the Pure Flame, is pushing for some severe genetic cleansing against the lower castes.
But then, during what's supposed to be just routine maintenance down in the lower decks, Elias accidentally unearths an ancient secret that totally shatters that official history. He's investigating some power fluctuations in these super old archival sublevels, uses a low clearance override, and stumbles onto a forgotten, sealed crate marked Level Omega. And what's inside? A centuries-old cryogenic vial and this really battered old data slate.
When he activates that slate, the face of Captain Harlan Voss himself actually pops up. The commander had left behind a recorded message with this chilling core directive: "If my line survives, let it break them." Turns out, Voss actively opposed that rigid purity system the council was starting to build. He was terrified that his genetic legacy was going to be twisted into chains of purity by ambitious officers, instead of being used to keep the crew unified.
Okay, so here is the absolute turning point. Elias takes that cryogenic vial and scans it against his own DNA, which is just on file from standard health checks. And he gets a jaw-dropping, seemingly impossible genetic match. 99.87% to Harlan Voss himself. He actually runs the scan 3 times because he can't believe it, but the result is totally irrefutable.
Obviously needing help, Elias takes this to Lena Solari. She's a genetics lab worker with a 62% index, so she can run a completely off-the-books sequence for him. And with Lena's help, Elias realizes the crazy truth. He isn't just some distant descendant. Lena spots these intentional gaps in his DNA that were explicitly designed to mimic natural genetic drift and fly under the radar of standard scans. Elias is literally a living failsafe. He was intentionally engineered and hidden down among the lower castes for generations, entirely designed to be a weapon against this tyrannical caste system.
Now, as you might guess, secrets leak like radiation inside a closed generation ship. Whispers of Elias's true lineage start spreading through the lower decks like wildfire. First, it's just a fellow janitor,
then maybe a hydroponics tech. But soon enough, this quiet, highly strategic rebellion starts forming among the workers. They start calling themselves the Echoes, and they meet down in the incredibly noisy waste reclamation tunnels where the security drones can't easily eavesdrop.
This whole situation is building toward a massive confrontation, and it really highlights the stark contrast between the two main legacies on board. On one hand, you have Counselor Draven Voss. He's sitting pretty with an index of 98.4% on the elite council, but the kicker is, he's actually just a distant cousin riding a totally false legacy. And opposing him, Elias Kane, a 12.4% janitor who is the direct, intentionally engineered backup, the true legacy.
Well, the council isn't blind, right? They hear the murmurs and immediately attempt this brutal crackdown. Security drones drastically ramp up their patrols. Then, the ongoing resource and ration cuts are suddenly, and falsely I might add, blamed on impure sabotage, just to whip up fear among the populace. And to cap it off, they yank Elias right from his shift and drag him to the mid-level tribunal chamber, straight up accusing him of being a vessel for genetic contamination.
But here's where it gets brilliant. Instead of launching some violent uprising, Elias and the Echoes pull off an absolute tactical masterstroke. Right when Draven Voss is demanding Elias be arrested in the chamber, Lena and the Echoes hack in with the unsuppressed historical records. They broadcast Commander Voss's original message to literally every single screen, hab unit, and mess hall across the entire ship. I mean, talk about a stunning ship-wide awakening. That one revelation forces all 50,000 people on board to just stop and ask themselves one massive central question. Why had purity become everything? Why on earth were they tossing highly talented kids of capable engineers into waste duty just because of some arbitrary number? All while mediocre, distant descendants got to rule the ship. Which brings us to the core observation confrontation, the final stand before the sleeping founders. So the High Council throws together this panicked emergency session right in front of the original crew's cryotubes. Counselor Draven tries his hardest to publicly discredit Elias, but Lena and her allies are completely ready for him. They actually project a massive genetic overlay for the entire ship to see in real time. It mathematically proves the whole system is a sham. Draven is exposed as just a deluded relative desperate to consolidate power, while Elias is undeniably confirmed as the 99.87% engineered backup whose only real motive is to fulfill the ship's original mission.
Watching his absolute authority just evaporate, Draven gets desperate and actually draws a sidearm. In the chaos that follows, Elias manages to break free and slams his hand onto the scanner of Commander Voss's personal cryotube. Boom! His DNA instantly unlocks the long-dormant system, confirming contingency Omega. And that triggers the final blow. True holographic logs and Voss's own private journals spill out into the room, undeniably exposing the Council's ancient betrayal. It's so damning that even Draven's own personal guards end up arresting him.
The resulting paradigm shift fundamentally and surprisingly peacefully reforms the Aether. They don't erase the purity indices completely, but they strip them of all social power. They're just used for standard health tracking now. The council gets completely restructured with actual elected representatives from every single deck. Education, your job, it's all determined by your actual talent now, not your bloodline. And the best part? Elias turns down any sort of fancy formal title. He actually chooses to go back to teaching and doing maintenance work.
Because really, it all boils down to one incredibly powerful truth. Purity was never in the genes. It was always in the choices. Elias proved to everyone that true leadership and your actual value to society comes from the actions you take. It comes from what you choose to do, not the genetic lottery you happen to be born into. Which leaves us with a pretty profound thought to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. If the very foundation of your society was suddenly proven to be a complete lie, would you let it break you, or would you choose to break this system? Elias Kane, a 12.4% janitor, chose to break the system and save his world. Definitely something to keep in mind the next time someone tells you your potential is limited by some metric you can't even control. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep seeking the truth behind the structures around you.